has its beginnings amidst the jagged peaks of the Swiss Alps. Small trickles of water, the runoff waters from snowfields, glaciers, and mountain lakes, joining to form brooks, gathering force and growing into a creek, then a river. As it completes its 800-mile course to the North Sea, Europe's most important waterway, rich in history and legend. This is the Rhine, my river. It is 5 days from my home port, Basel in Switzerland, to Rotterdam in the Netherlands. It takes twice as long for the return trip upriver. Looking at the infant Rhine, you'd hardly believe how soon it will be the majestic river the Germans fondly call Father Rhine. From its two principal sources, nearly 8,000 feet high and some 20 miles apart, tumble numerous silvery rivulets, digging little furrows on rocky slopes, nursing alpine flowers as they pass, hurrying to join others of their kind to form turbulent, shallow creeks, easily crossed by children on vacation. From the alpine meadows, the two creeks, already called the Vorderrhein and Hinterrhein, start a fast descent, gaining strength and growing rapidly with each new tributary they receive. Cascading steeply through narrow, spectacular gorges, where their force is captured in hydroelectric power stations to produce inexpensive electricity for villages, farmers, and local industry. After a drop of more than 5,000 feet in their first 45 miles, the two branches join. By the time the young Rhine enters and broadens into Lake Constance, 100 miles downstream, it has already served as a boundary and received several tributaries from neighboring Liechtenstein and Austria. Lake Constance itself is a border. Swift ferry boats shuttle back and forth between German, Swiss, and Austrian ports. For a few miles after leaving Lake Constance, the Rhine seems a placid stream in a typical idyllic Swiss countryside, until it encounters an obstruction in a sharp bend of the riverbed near Schaffhausen. A bank of high cliffs 500 feet wide with a huge sharp granite rock rising vertically in the center. Revealing its awesome power with a deafening roar, the river thunders over a 70-foot drop at a rate of over 200,000 gallons every second, the largest cataract of its kind in Europe, known to men since the days of Caesar and his legions. Resuming its westward course and its role as a boundary, with its left bank in Switzerland and the right bank in Germany, the Rhine becomes commercially navigable just above Basel, Switzerland. Winding its way through the city, it turns sharply northward, a course it will maintain till it reaches the North Sea, more than 600 miles away. Here at Basel, the frontiers of three nations converge, making it a truly international city. Its airport is on French soil. This railroad station is owned by Germany. And as you look down upon Basel Harbor, which is Swiss, there is Germany to the right, Switzerland in the center, and France to the left. A stainless steel shaft at the end of the harbor basin marks the Dreiländerecke, the point where the three countries meet. The freighters and barges crowding the basin, being unloaded or waiting to receive new cargoes, belong mostly to Dutch, German, French, Belgian, and Swiss companies. They are home for their skippers, their families, and small crews. Their decks are often the only playground for a small child whose mother is busy with household chores or shopping in town while maintenance of his vessel keeps father occupied most of the time. Soon they will start downriver again. At the outset, it is really down canal between Basel and Strasburg. Here, the Rhine is too shallow for large modern freighters, and traffic is diverted into the 60-mile-long Grand Canal d'Alsace, which runs parallel to the river. Constructed by France and opened in 1963, the canal contains 6 locks with sluice gates and power stations and an average drop of 40 feet. Once out of the locks and back in the open river, traffic moves more swiftly. Soon ancient cities come in sight, and the spires of cathedrals where kings were crowned and emperors lie buried. The pages of history are crowded with accounts of struggles for possession or control of the river. The Romans maintained a Rhine fleet. Here Caesar in 55 BC battled first Celtic chieftains, then Germanic tribes, to carve out the province of Roman Gaul, shown on this map, drawn by a Roman legionnaire. The Saga of Benevolence, rooted in ancient folklore and strangely mixed with bits of history, tells of Alberic the dwarf, guardian of a treasure of gold and jewels on the bottom of the Rhine, a treasure cursed and fatal to all its owners, and of Siegfried, a mythical young Nordic hero who slew the dragon guarding the river's bank, conquered the treasure, and with it crossed the Rhine at Worms to win the hand of Kriemhild, beauteous young sister of the King of Burgundy. Of jealous hatred between the princess and the queen, her brother's wife. Of court intrigue and treachery leading to the slaying of guileless Siegfried by Hagen, faithful vassal of the king, who defiantly facing the widow, returns the cursed treasure to the Rhine. Bent on revenge, the widowed princess marries the king of the Huns and causes a bloodbath in which all Burgundians, including Kriemhild herself, are slain. The saga lived on. In time, with poetry and music adopting and embellishing the legend, the mythical Siegfried had, in more modern days, become a German idol. In this early German propaganda film, the fearless young warrior, Germany, efficiently dispatched the wily dragon, Germany's enemies. The year was 1914, and a printed message following the scene exhorted Germans to be worthy of their forebears, draw the sword once more, and to buy war bonds. This they did, and they and the rest of the world went to war. 4 years later, when the bedraggled remnants of the German army retreated across the Rhine, the bloodiest war known in history came to an end. The Rhineland, its industrial parts still intact, was occupied by the victors until 1930, and then demilitarized by treaty. A few years later, on March 7th, 1936, a new German army came thundering back across the bridges. Germany had renounced the treaty and reoccupied the Rhineland. Jubilant crowds of Germans waved flags and sang Die Wacht am Rhein. Soon they and the rest of the world would be at war again. The Second World War, longer and even more ruthless than the first. In Western Europe, Belgium was overrun, and Holland, and then France. It was well over 5 years before the Allied forces were able to drive the German army back toward the Rhine. If they succeeded in crossing the river in force, the end would soon be in sight. Most bridges had been destroyed by Allied bombs or retreating Germans, but one, a railroad bridge at Remagen near Koblenz, was found to be still intact, and Allied columns quickly began converging on it. In the overall assault plan directed by General Eisenhower and his field commanders, seizure of the Remagen Bridge received top priority, and all forces available in the area were directed toward it. So quickly and surprisingly did advance units reach the bridge that they were able to dash across and overrun the forward German defense posts before they could set off more than 2 demolition charges, which damaged the bridge but left it passable. On March 7th, 1945, 9 years to the day after German troops had reoccupied the Rhineland, American soldiers crossed the Remagen Bridge to invade the heartland of Germany. For 10 days, infantry units and armored vehicles moved across under constant shelling to establish and then widen the bridgehead on the right bank of the Rhine. Then, suddenly and without warning, the damaged center span of the bridge, further weakened from the close shelling, collapsed. There were many casualties, and the accident caused some delay. But pontoon bridges had already been thrown across, and nothing could change the final outcome. 2 months later, Germany surrendered. The scars of war have all but disappeared. Another chapter in the Rhine's long history. For most of the tourists cruising on the river, Remagen is just another name, another set of ruins, a part of the romantic Rhine with its tales of heroes and robber barons, with its monuments and crumbling castles perched on steep rocks that hem in the swiftly flowing river and force it into sharp turns, making passage through this section difficult and, in bad weather, hazardous. Navigable lanes are narrowed by shallows and hidden rocks, and control signals, operated by lookouts on shore, must be observed to prevent accidents in the heavy river traffic. There are more than 16,000 vessels in the Rhine fleet, with a total carrying capacity of 8 million tons. 3/4 of them are on the road at any given time, transporting bulk merchandise such as coal, iron ore, oil, and building materials on the river and its tributaries. In addition to the self-propelled freighters, the majority, there are towed barges and whole lighter trains moved forward by special flat-nosed pusher-type tugs. A dense network of canals and waterways links the Rhine with the Rhone, the Marne, the Meuse, covering the lowlands, Holland and Belgium, like lacework, branching out eastward to the Weser and Elbe to connect to eastern Germany and Poland. Barges can reach the big cities and small remote towns, often passing through ancient canals built long before good roads existed. Transport by barge is still the cheapest and most practical way of moving bulk goods where speed is not essential. To expand further the network of Europe's waterways, an important new canal is under construction in Germany, linking the Rhine through one of its tributaries with the Danube, Europe's second longest river. Officially named the Europa Canal, it will, upon its completion, enable the big freight barges to travel between the North Sea and the Black Sea, and will thus stimulate the flow of trade between the countries of Eastern Europe and the West. Free and unrestricted navigation rights on the Rhine guaranteed all nations under a 100-year-old treaty. Modern industries' rising demands for fuel and raw materials, greatly increased production of heavy machinery, chemicals, and other industrial goods, and the need of some European countries who are not self-sufficient to import basic foodstuffs from abroad. All these factors have contributed to a vast increase of freight traffic on the Rhine, which in recent years has exceeded an annual average of 200 million tons. 200 million tons. If this is hard to visualize, think of a freight train made up of standard boxcars, 40 million of them, spanning 10 times the width of the United States. Of course, a boxcar holds only 50 tons. Barges can carry better than 2,000 tons. From the transfer docks of Antwerp and Rotterdam, Bremen and Hamburg, they are making their way up the river and its branches, carrying cotton, lumber, and other raw materials to the factories of the riparian states. They, in turn, use the Rhine to ship many of their products abroad or to one another. Seeing the constant traffic on the river, its many ports and tributaries, it is easy to understand why the Rhine has been called the Aorta of Europe. With the rise of the industrial age, the economic way of transportation and easy access to raw materials favored the establishment of heavy industries in the Rhineland. Deep beneath the surface at Duisburg, Europe's biggest inland port, where the Ruhr River empties into the Rhine, lie vast deposits of high-grade coal, and the ore mines of Alsace-Lorraine are not far away. Stretched over 20 miles along the river and dotting the Ruhr Valley up to Essen are blast furnaces, foundries, mine shafts, and rolling mills. One-third of Germany's steel iron and copper is produced here. And much industrial sludge is discharged into the Rhine, already badly contaminated, with all kinds of waste matter dumped into it along its course. To hold the river's pollution down to a tolerable safety level, a special police force set up under the government's Water Protection Agency patrols the river continuously, watching for barges leaking oil or dumping waste, and taking frequent samplings near industrial discharge points. In the agency's laboratory, the samples are analyzed for the type and quantity of pollutants contained, such as detergents and phosphates, and for the presence and concentration of radioactive particles, such as strontium-90, which may be harmful to man or animal. Heavy fines and the threat of closing face any plant found in violation of the government's minimum safety standards. Early in the morning at Emmerich, there is always a big lineup of barges waiting for customs inspection. At Emmerich, the Rhine, now over a half-mile wide, enters Holland, and all the vessels going to or coming from the North Sea ports must pass through here. As many as 1,200 of them have come through Emmerich in a single day. And since twice as much cargo moves upstream as moves downstream, reflecting Europe's import needs, German customs inspectors are kept busy making the rounds of the freighters entering Germany from Holland and waiting for them in midstream. Inspection, once a lengthy procedure, has been greatly simplified in recent years and is usually confined to checking the ship's papers and the manifest. The latter states the kind and quantity of cargo carried, its origin, and final destination. The ship's papers must give the names of all persons on board and contain a detailed listing of all quantities of coffee, tea, and cigarettes for personal use of pilot, family, and crew. Germany has a high import duty on these items and strictly limits the amounts each person can bring in duty-free. There is an occasional spot check of the pilot's or crew's quarters or the merchandise in the hull. Then the ship is on its way again. Upriver to Strasburg and Mainz and Basel, downstream to Antwerp and Rotterdam. Traffic is heavy in the Delta, where the Rhine divides into numerous branches, all wide and deep enough to permit the building and launching of seagoing vessels, and where its waters mingle with those of the Meuse and the Scheldt. And then it's the port. Discharge the cargo, clean the hull, take on another load, and journey upriver again, back home. For centuries, people have battled for the river. At Strasburg, the hollow and useless eyes of empty gun emplacements stare across the border. At Worms, a grim-faced Hagen stands, forever returning the cursed treasure of the Nibelungs to the Rhine. The Rhine, no longer a barrier between nations, but a roadway pointing to their common destiny. From the experience of a somber past, they hope to have gained an understanding how to build for a peaceful future. In this, the Rhine has its part. Not as a German river, nor French, nor Swiss, nor Dutch, but as a river of Europe.